Good day. Welcome to another CAEF webinar in our series, Exploring Zionism, Exposing Anti-Zionism. The Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation is a registered charitable organization. We hope you will continue to attend our webinars and give us feedback on this and other programs. And we ask that you also donate to enable CAEF to continue to do innovative work, including education and advocacy on issues affecting Israel and the Jewish people today. Our webinar series is looking at both the way Zionism is expressed in everyday life by Jews and the everyday occurrences of anti-Zionism that include harassment, antagonism, threats, denigration, ridicule, deception, and other microaggressions. Many people wish to argue that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, which is like stating a non sequitur, I hate Israelis, not Jews. Zionism, as so passionately expressed by last week's guest, Lauren Isaacs, is the belief in the Jewish people's rights to a country in their ancient homeland. It is the civil rights movement of the Jewish people. Likely the oldest civil rights movement in history. Zionism is not a movement begun during the age of pogroms in Russia or Arab attacks in the Levant, but is the cry for Zion that is as old as the Torah itself. It is the Jewish people's determination and freedom expressed in the love of Israel. Clearly, it is not easy to stand up against bigots, especially to defend oneself. Jews are very good at defending the rights of others, as noted in almost every social justice movement. Jews have been founding members and visible activists, but Jews are also obligated to stand up for one another, for the rights of Jews to be free from hatred and bigotry, and most definitely free from physical violence and mental anguish. Insulting Israel, spreading lies, demonizing and denigrating Israel, holding her to a standard applied to no other country, calling for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions are all clearly acts of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred. And insulting individuals on the basis of their race, ethnicity, or religion, undermining people with degrading comments and excluding them from group activities or creating obstacles to equal participation and denying opportunities for fair treatment are all racist and anti-Semitic acts. One doesn't have to be a scholar of history or the Holocaust or a legal expert or a politician to know that today's anti-Semitism takes many forms. All Jews need to recognize it and be prepared to stand up against it. Thus, our speaker today represents for me the embodiment of courage and tenacity as she navigated anti-Semitism at a place in which she volunteered, a place of art, supposedly of beauty and humanity, yet one in which she saw the uglier side. Before I introduce her, please note that this webinar is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website. Our guest will take questions from the Q&A function on your Zoom screen, so please use it, not the chat function. Okay, so let me introduce Dr. Ronit Clemens, who has a strong background in helping others as a clinical psychologist and philosophy professor. She has an MA in Jewish philosophy from Baltimore Hebrew University, an MA in counseling psychology from Bowie State University, and a PhD in interdisciplinary studies from the Union Institute and University. She is a certified alternative resolution mediator, a psychotherapist, and court expert witness. Since experiencing anti-Semitism personally, she is committed to helping others understand this phenomenon and helping them to take action. For, as our sage Hillel the Elder said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? He goes on to ask that we also stand with others, but too often, Jews are only standing up for others and not for themselves, not for other Jews, not for our community and the Jewish state of Israel. I hope that you will stand with Ronit and fight the normalization of anti-Semitism at the community level and take action. Welcome, Ronit.
Hello, shalom, thank you, and welcome. The topic for today is combating anti-Semitism in our day-to-day communities. And I would like to start by sharing my story. I retired and moved to San Diego and expected nothing but sunshine bliss. I delved heavily into arts and crafts, to include attending the docent training program at the San Diego Museum of Art. I complied with all the rules and excelled at presenting artworks. But I was marginalized from the get-go. I was a target for gossip and anti-Semitic accusations. I observed leadership enabling hatred, administration fearing exposure, and staff submitting to complicity. Eventually, I was discharged without committing a dischargeable offense. When I went to the executive director to get answers and to have a meaningful conversation about my experience, her response was, "They have the right to hate you." I would like to pause for a minute and let you reflect on that, let it sink in what it means when you go to the executive director and she says they have the right to hate you. So then I started to talk with the people around me, and they didn't know what to do. Many referred me to Jewish organizations. All of them I followed. The Jewish organization didn't know what to do. One Jewish organization told me to hire an attorney, and another one attempted to build me a legal case through their own legal department. But as it turned out, there was nothing illegal, so there was no case. Then I realized, quite surprisingly, that I was on my own, and it occurred to me that I might not be the only one in this predicament. So I became motivated to look into the dynamics of anti-Semitism in our day-to-day communities and into the role of microaggression within the scope of anti-Semitism, because for me, complicity was no longer a good option. Before I share my findings with you, I would like to explain what I mean by day-to-day communities. Anti-Semitic microaggression is everywhere, but today I'm going to focus on places where we go for cultural, recreational, and devotional events. This is where we spend our free time, where we enrich our lives, learn something new, worship, socialize, go to have a good time, and the list goes on. That can be a church, a mosque, a temple, a gallery, a museum, a theater. There is a community of volunteer ushers in theaters. Any guild, any society, any club, and the list goes on. So here are my findings. There is good news and bad news, and I will start with the bad news. The bad news is that we are on our own. The legal method of collecting evidence is ineffective in combating anti-Semitic microaggression because offenders can easily deny or change what they said or did. They can easily deflect or claim free speech protection. Since Jewish organizations rely on the legal method, they are also ineffective in combating anti-Semitic microaggression in our day-to-day communities. And of course, even if the legal method was effective, which is not, by its nature, it demands a major investment of time, effort, and expense that many of us don't welcome. So here is the good news. We can and we should try to talk with them. I tried and failed. I was rejected or ignored, and it didn't happen. So we should and we can submit a petition to the targeted community place in order to pressure them to come to the table for a meaningful conversation about anti-Semitism. I was surprised how easy it was to post a petition at the site that you can see on the top right. somebody referred me to change.org, and the name of my petition is Combating Anti-Semitism. And it was really easy to do. They took me from one place to another, from one step to another. And I just wrote it the way I talk. So if you want to duplicate it in order to target other places, I welcome you and I encourage you to do so. We can and we should convey the message to the targeted community place that anti-Semitism is not a normal community environment and not a part of a community diversity. And I will say something about that later too. Point number 3, we can and we should demand targeted community places that they educate their staff about anti-Semitism to include microaggression, and that they install policies towards zero tolerance of anti-Semitism. And lastly, we can and we should threat to boycott and divest targeted community places, as well as to expose them to the public, donors, and supporters as applied if demands are not met. Here is something that concerns me a lot. We are living in a time and place, probably all around the world, where we're experiencing a surge of anti-Semitism. You can tell just by glancing at it that the numbers are going up and the bar graphs are becoming longer. The bar graph on the top right is the last 2 years in Los Angeles, which is not far from where I am. I am in San Diego. And I believe that it applies to Southern California. When I shared my story with a friend, with some friends, there were some people who said, if you don't like it there, go somewhere else. Well, the reality is that in Southern California, there is no other place to go to. We are saturated with anti-Semitism. So here is the deal. We have an army of lawyers among us, and we have a long list of Jewish organizations. And as you can see from these statistics of the last 5 years, they are extremely ineffective. So in my opinion, we are standing at a fork road, a road fork, something like that. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want to keep on doing what we are doing that is not working and expecting a different result? Or do we want to take another road like the one that I am talking about today? In addition, I have another problem with those statistics because they only relate to assault, vandalism, and harassment. By no means, I do not intend to minimize the horror of assault, vandalism, and harassment. It is absolutely horrific. But I must point out that this is only a small part of the entire scope of anti-Semitism. This is not what we are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So here I'm showing you the entire scope of anti-Semitism. I divided it into 4 levels of intensity, and I gave it names. The number of levels are not important. The names are not important. What is important is that we understand the concept. So on the top, I put the overt nefarious, which is the radical intensity of anti-Semitism. This is where the assault, vandalism, and harassment or hate crimes are committed. And I assigned it to people who are aware that what they say or do is anti-Semitic. And they say or do it openly with the intention to cause harm. In their perception, they just say or do what everybody else is feeling, which means that it is normal to hate the Jews and or Israel. And I would like to show you a slide of what overt nefarious look like. It consists of hate speech and hate crimes, and hate speech very often and very quickly become hate crime. The woman on the top in the photo is Laura Gilbert Kay, who was gunned down in her synagogue in San Diego, not far from me. One mistake, on the bottom corner on the right is a store, a Jewish store in Jersey City, where 6 people lost their lives, and absolute tragedy. Now, I must point out that we are making a mistake that I hear again and again. And I don't know who it applies to in the audience, but I will say it anyway, because it's very important to understand. When we talk among ourselves about crimes, about hate crimes, there is always somebody who says that person must have been mentally ill. When we assign hate crimes to mental illness, we are washing our hands from it. What this means is that it's up to the mental health professionals, up to the legal system, up to the government, up to somebody high there to take care of it, not us. But the mistake that we are making is that this is not a problem of mental illness, but of indoctrination. And indoctrination is not a mental illness. Once we understand that we are dealing with indoctrination, then there is something we can do about it. I would like you to take a look at the faces of the people on the left who are protesting. You can probably see that they are very young. They are probably in their teens or early 20s or something along that line. They are in the phase of rebellion of their human development. This is a natural phase that we all go through, some longer than others, some more intensely than others. This is where the hormones are raging and people are ready to go to war. Never mind that they are fighting windmills, but they are ready to go to war. This is the stage where it's easy for them to become radicalized. And the question, can we do something before people become radicalized? So let me talk a little about radicalization, because that goes along with indoctrination. They are obviously highly indoctrinated. And the question is, where did it come from? No one is born hateful. No one is born indoctrinated. Everybody starts from zero, but then it escalates on the spectrum. It starts in childhood and progresses. And a child doesn't have to grow up in a hateful environment, in a radical hateful environment in order to become indoctrinated. It only takes microaggression in order to become indoctrinated. So let me give you a scenario. Let's say that any family in the community decides to spend the evening together and they watch a movie and something Jewish related comes up in the movie. And one of the parents goes, yikes. That's enough of a microaggression in order to send a message to the child that something is wrong with the Jews. Even if he doesn't understand it, he still sponges the messages. Or let me give you another example. Let's say that a parent tells a child, don't play with David today. How about you play with Peter today? Because David is celebrating a holiday that you don't need to know anything about. What the parents just did was to divide the community into us and them. That's the message that the child gets. And you probably have examples of your own. In other words, it comes from the parents, it comes from the family, the community, possibly from church, from the neighborhood, from children in the street, from baseball practice and on. That's the day-to-day community where we interact with other people all the time. Then that child grows up, gets into the teen years, and start to socialize heavily, and goes to parties. And in the parties, people do foolish things that otherwise they wouldn't do because they consider it harmless fun, when it can be offensive to some people. And this is where the people are ready to become indoctrinated. So let's go back to the levels of intensity. Andrea, you might want to mute yourself and see what happens in the community. So I assigned the overt naive level of intensity to people who are not aware that what they say or do is anti-Semitic because it feels normal. I must emphasize the term normal because at this time and place, anti-Semitism in our communities is so prevalent that it is normalized to the point that it's like fish that doesn't see the water. So so basically, when we are combating anti-Semitism in the community, we are combating anti-Semitism. We are combating the normalization of anti-Semitism in the community. I hope that I said it correctly. Underneath the overt naive, I placed the covert nefarious, and I assigned it to people who are aware that what they do or say is motivated by hatred, but they don't reveal it in public. Instead, they issue accusations that are not related to anti-Semitism in order to do harm. In my opinion, this is what happened to me at the museum, and I'm going to talk about it a little further. On the bottom is the covert naive level of intensity, which I assign to people who may not be aware that what they feel is anti-Semitic. They just go along to get along in their community groups with no question asked. And here is what the overt naive and covert naive look like. I combined both of them because this is where most of the population is. This is where the fish is that doesn't see the water. This is where we experience the microaggression. So the examples that I brought here are from the museum, not the photographs, only the statements, because this is the examples that I have. I'm pretty sure the people in the audience have their own examples, and I would absolutely love to hear about it. So here goes. You don't know how to be an American. You don't understand American culture. You don't fit in American culture. That was said to me by the manager of the docent training program, who was always in the classroom and mostly sitting in the back, surveying the people in the class. I was actually quite offended by that. And I took that to the California State Department that deals with discrimination. And they took my case. But soon they came back to let me know that as they started the investigation, they found out that although the San Diego Museum of Art is a public museum, they do not receive public funds from the state. So there was no point for them to go on because there was nothing to withhold. There was no leverage. There was no way to punish them. So they didn't go anywhere. Going on, the Jews are very powerful, which is why everybody is afraid of them. That was said to me by a trainee over lunch. At that point, I wasn't paying attention as I do today. I thought, let it roll over my shoulders. By then, the manager of the program parroted it by saying to me, you are very powerful, which is why everybody is afraid of you. That was a defining moment for me when I realized that I am dealing with anti-Semitism. I am not just dealing with some discrimination. I am dealing specifically with anti-Semitism. It fell on me like a ton of bricks, literally. And if I may put a footnote here, at that point, I fainted. And if I can put another footnote, when I was on the floor, the manager, instead of calling an ambulance, he called security. Let that sink in. Going on. Diversity is about different opinions. You have to agree to disagree. That was said to me by a representative of human resources with whom I try to have a meaningful conversation about my anti-Semitic experience. She was totally closed to the discussion. I was talking about anti-Semitism and she was trying to deflect it back on me and telling me diversity is about different opinions. You have to agree to disagree. And I already mentioned the executive director telling me they have the right to hate you. On the top right, parroting misconceptions, omitting clarifications, failing to report suffering, teaching and role modeling ignorance and insensitivity. This all belongs, as I observed it, to the manager of the docent program. This is where microaggression was at its height and it was completely legal. Under the covert naive, I put some statements that I believe were slip of the tongue. Otherwise, the covert naive is hidden and silent. So here goes. In the midst of a conversation about the healing properties of art, somebody said, Israel exploit art to denigrate non-Jews. Out of the blue, without any relationship to the context. At one point, there was news about some Jewish celebrity, and somebody said, don't pay attention to it. He was Jewish. And the same person, the same trainee who told me that the Jews are very powerful, which is why everybody is afraid of them, also asked me at a different occasion, why are all of you Republicans? The overt nefarious intensity, level of intensity, how I refer to it, is sneaky, is sinister because you don't see it coming. It's covert, but it's very aggressive. I couldn't resist referring to the Dreyfus affair because I believe that the Dreyfus affair was not an isolated case. I believe that the Dreyfus affair is still going on consistently, still live and well. And I compared it to my experience in San Diego Museum of Art, but I do not believe that this is a single isolated case. So let's go through the comparison. Dreyfus was charged with treason. I was charged with insufficient loyalty. I have no idea what insufficient loyalty is. I can understand pledging loyalty to a flag, to a country, and if you live in a country where there is royalty, probably to the royal family, I have no idea what it means to pledge loyalty to a museum of art. That was not the only accusation that was thrown at me. There were a whole bunch of accusations, but whenever I would debunk an accusation, they just moved the goalposts to another one and another one and another one. And that was the last one, which they refused to explain. we were both discharged dishonorably in a very humiliating manner per evidence, which of course was false evidence. In the case of Dreyfus, the crowd shouted death to the Jews. And in my case, the executive director told me they have the right to hate you. We were both found guilty after the true perpetrators were found. And the efforts were switched to covering up the wrongdoing. And to top that all off, the higher ups denied anti-Semitic motivation due to including other Jews in their midst. This is a misconception that if you have Jews in your midst, you are not anti-Semitic. When I told my story to one of my friends, he asked me, do they have other Jews there? I said, yes. So he goes, they're not anti-Semitic. Oh, yes, they are. Because the Jews that are there are marginalized. They are second citizens. They have to watch what they say and do when other groups, when the, I don't know, white Americans don't have to watch what they do. They have a free card. Don't go to jail, keep going. And you probably understand what I am saying. I would like to summarize why it is so important to focus on the day-to-day communities and why we need to combat the day-to-day communities by combating the normalization of anti-Semitism in the communities. It is important because this is where the bulk of anti-Semitism is, which is also where we live our cultural, recreational, and devotional lives. It is important because consistent exposure to anti-Semitic microaggression can be as mentally crippling as a short exposure to radical anti-Semitism. It is just so long that one can assume the marginalized position, which is true to all ethnic communities other than Jews. It is important because this is where the escalation of indoctrination begins and progresses, especially during the formative and the rebellion phases of human development. We can and should stop a community volcano from erupting by cooling it down, because it is horrifying to imagine what can happen if the escalation of anti-Semitism continues. It really becomes the duty of all of us to combat the normalization of anti-Semitism in our communities, if only with a minimal effort of a signature. Think about voting. Each one of us has one vote, yet that one vote goes a long way. Think about the environment. We probably, all of us, recycle. Recycling one item, that little goes a long way. This is something that we all understand. I think that it's about time that we understand that a minimal effort of combating anti-Semitism in our communities can also go a long way. So here is my call for action. At your discretion, sign my petition to the San Diego Museum of Art at change.org/combating anti-Semitism. As needed, duplicate it for targeting other community places where talking fails. There are several millions of us in the world, and one signature can go a long way. If you don't want to write your own petition, sign other petitions. If you go to my petition, you will see 11 more of them. Sign all of them. They all try to combat anti-Semitism in one way or another. If you have Facebook, join the group Combating Anti-Semitism. for posting links to petitions, and for discussing anything related to it. This is a group that I created. At the moment, it's still new. There are only 10 members there, and there is not much going on there. There is only one petition, the one that I started. And I hope that it will grow and become a place where we can post links to petitions and discuss anything related to it. Okay, action number 3 is a little tricky because I'm only doing today one part of my presentation due to time constraints. And hopefully I'll be able to do the second part, hopefully sooner than later. So I will read it as if I did the 2 methods, even though I only talked about one. Be confident that with the 2 methods of targeting community places with nonviolent pressure and turning off the automatic pilot of indoctrination with speech, you are fully equipped for doing your share in cooling down the anti-Semitic community volcano. So what does it mean to turning off the automatic pilot of indoctrination? In almost every presentation that you hear, when people ask, what do we need to do? The presenter will say, educate yourself and others. Educating myself, I understand, but educating others is a problem because many people, if not most of the people, at least in Southern California, are already indoctrinated to some extent. They believe that they are educated. They don't want to hear what I have to say or you have to say or any one of us has to say. So we have to use a special technique in order to get through to them. And we do it by turning off the automatic pilot of indoctrination. We do it by asking, by not saying statements, by not telling them, that's not true. The truth is, da, 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 asking them questions. So in the second part of my presentation, I talk about how to turn off the automatic pilot of indoctrination in order to be able to get through to people who are already indoctrinated. Action number 4, explain the volcano concept to others. Our goal is to halt the escalation of anti-Semitism by halting the escalation of indoctrination in our day-to-day communities. Action number 5, invite me to give this presentation anywhere, locally and globally. I will do it 24/7, day, night, doesn't matter, I will do it. And last but not least, resist complicity, because if you are not working on de-escalating anti-Semitism, you are working on escalating it by default. I would like to place a footnote here too, that while I was working, there were occasions when I helped people recover from drug addiction. In the field of recovery, there is a saying that if you are not working on your recovery, you are working on your addiction. I believe that the same logic applies here. If we are not working on de-escalating, we are working on escalating. I believe, at least I believe truly from the bottom of my heart that if we don't do something, if we don't understand that we can stop the indoctrination from escalating, we are up for some very rough times because things are not going to get better, but worse. So I would like to leave you with a thought that now is not a time to be complacent. Whatever you can do, whatever action you can take, a little goes a long way. And with that, I would like to thank you for your patience and for your participation and to welcome your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I have a few questions people have submitted, and you certainly lived up to my expectations. Thank you. You are courageous, you're taking action, and that's the message that we really want to share with everyone. So a couple of questions just about the presentation. Someone asked if you could define what you experienced that you called marginalization. What does that mean?
It means that when we had to partner, there were times where for exercises where we need to partner with another person, it became an us versus them. There were no non-Jews who would reach out to the Jewish people in order to partner with them. So it was always, when it was time to partner, I would have to find another Jewish person in order to partner with them. It means that we cannot be free with our speech or with our actions as other person were. We had to be on our toes all the time. There were two docents who were Jewish who took on themselves to mentor me on how to be a Jew in an anti-Semitic environment.
Wow.
And they did a very good job, except that as an Israeli, it was very hard for me to do. Their advice to me was, you see nothing, you hear nothing, you say nothing, and you do nothing. You keep a low profile and you get through.
Wow. That answers one of the questions. Someone asked if there were other Jews present, did you reach out to them? It sounds like they were not prepared to take action, stand up, or be noticed. Is that correct? You couldn't have engaged with them?
That is correct. I engaged with three other Jewish people, and they were all aware of the environment, but they were complicit with it. It was easier for them. They were raised in this country, in the United States. They know how to behave when you are marginalized. I don't. I'm Israeli. I don't keep a low profile. I talk, I say, I express my opinion. So I became a target.
Wow. You did a really good job of explaining microaggressions. I really think that most of the time Jews are looking for some big visible action before they call it anti-Semitism, right? Like in Toronto, people have hung horrible banners on freeways that express hatred for Jews and for Israel, or they've hit people in the face or the stomach while walking down the street, or, I mean, really outrageous acts. What you've spoken of is microaggression. So why is it important to pay attention to these small things?
I see the radical acts of anti-Semitism as a symptom rather than the source. I see microaggression as the source that escalates the indoctrination to the point of radical anti-Semitism. Radical anti-Semitism doesn't happen on a regular basis when we interact in our communities. It's high profile, so it's easy to associate anti-Semitism almost strictly with radical acts of anti-Semitism. We see it, we hear it, it's in the news, it's on the TV, we go to memorial services, and the whole thing is horrific and it touches us to the core. But I must emphasize that this is a symptom. This is the explosion from the volcano. This is not where it starts, and this is only a small part of it. What's going on inside the volcano, I call it a community volcano, is what creates it. It's what starts it. It's what escalates it. And because it's in the form of microaggression, because we are complicit with it, because we are not doing anything about it, because we only use the legal method that is totally ineffective, we are not effective. We are not. And I showed you the statistics. Right. The numbers are going up, and there is no reason for them to stop unless we stop it. Unless we understand that we have to treat the indoctrination, not the explosion.
Well, you didn't use words like left or right. I know from having spoken with you and understanding your presentation that these microaggressions are coming from both from people on the left and from people on the right. Because you showed more pictures of people with swastikas, several of our listeners believed you were focusing mostly on the right. However, microaggressions, I don't believe belong to one side or the other. Can you say whether you think there's a distinction between how these are expressed by people on the left or the right?
I have no idea.
Okay, so
I have no idea how to relate to the left and the right. I see it as a whole. I see it from a psychological point of view, not from a political point of view. And I would like the audience to do the same. You don't need to be a politician, a historian, or a lawyer in order to understand indoctrination, in order to understand that a little goes a long way, and in order to understand that our participation, each one of us, no matter you are the right or the left, I don't know, is super important right now. That we are standing on a position, in a place and time where we have to ask ourselves, are we going to keep on doing what we are doing and expect a different result? Or are we going to take a different path? If you have a better path than I do, I would love to hear about it. I believe that my suggestion from a psychological point of view can work. Let's experiment. Let's see if it will get us somewhere.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I've had other guests talk about the ineffectiveness of some of the Jewish organizations, or to put it bluntly, their Jewish leadership. And you said you didn't get much help. What would you have liked to have heard from the organizations you reached out to? What could they have done?
Well, at that point, I didn't know. I didn't know about the topic. I was ignorant about anti-Semitism until it hit me on the head. I just didn't know what to expect. I wanted them to tell me what to do. I wanted them to tell me what they can do. And the only thing that they talked about is whether I do or don't have a legal case. So when they
provide psychological support.
I did receive support from one organization, from Stand With Us. And they're the ones who tried to create a legal case for me. But that was not successful because microaggression, you can't prove it. You can't come up with the evidence. And even if you can come up with the evidence, they can deny it. They can deflect. They can say it wasn't us, it was you, which is what they have been doing.
So are you following up to see whether naming and shaming the bigots will have an impact? Because that's what you're doing. You're saying this is an organization, these are the people in positions of power who did thus and so. Are you monitoring to see what impact? What's your next step?
I have no idea. This is all new to me. This is an experiment. This is what I'm thinking. This is my theory. And now I'm putting it to the laboratory to see if it works. I believe that it should.
Well, you're going to deliver this petition to the administration, is that right? Or to the board at the SDMA?
Well, if they did not discover it yet, then yes, I will.
Yes, I think you probably need to literally deliver it so that it hits them on the head. What about writing articles? Have you told the media or anybody that could take the story and do something?
Yes, yes. I approached 2 journals in San Diego, and they both rejected me. One of the producers of the main, I don't know if it's the main, there are 2 of them, journal wanted me to pay her. She wanted to give her $500 to put my article. So I do have an article, and it is posted on medium.com. And anybody who wants the link, I'm willing to give it. And I also sent that article to the museum. I actually wrote 3 articles, and this is one of them. And the museum has 2 of them. The third one is a little too, how should I say it, a little too blunt, so I'm holding on to it. But yes, I did approach the 2 of them, the 2 journals that are here, and they were not interested. It's possible because I'm not a high profile. It's possible because they're also complicit. I was complicit before it hits me on the head too. So I don't know what needs to hit us on the head in order for us to get out of our
comfort zone or
comfort
discomfort zone, right?
But so yes, I did approach them and they were not interested.
So they
in addition, one of them told me that she gets advertisement from the museum and she doesn't want to lose it.
Oh, right. So she's protecting them.
So yeah.
That's complicit. That's complicit for sure.
Yeah.
You had a longer career. You went to university in the US, you worked in the US, so you're not a new arrival despite their comment. Have you experienced, on reflection, do you think you experienced some of this anti-Semitism while in other roles in other cities?
Well, yes and no. When I was at the University of Chicago, when I was doing my undergraduate, there was a history professor who taught the protocols as if it was history.
He taught the protocols?
Yes, and I went to the dean and the dean lost his job. I'm laughing now, but it's not a laughing matter.
Oh, wow.
After 2014, when there was a war between Israel and Hamas, my car was vandalized. I ran into a problem. I belonged to a society at that time. I could not engage with anybody without people pouring their anger towards Israel at me. So, but what happened, the difference between then and now is that it was isolated cases that related to events that happened in the news. It was not consistent, or it was so startled, and I was so jaded that I couldn't see it. Now it fell on me like a ton of bricks. Here, it is not a matter of incident that happens after something happens in Israel. It's not committed by hate groups. It is everywhere. It is everywhere you go. In San Diego, you can go to a grocery store or department store, and there are swastikas on people's bodies everywhere. We are drenched with anti-Semitism here, both anti-Judaism and anti-Zionism. There is a car that is parked in my neighborhood that has a poster in the back window that says Israel did 9/11.
Oh my God.
And I have to pass through that car every time I go home or somewhere.
Well, the point of End Jew Hatred, which is the civil rights grassroots movement that CAEF is involved in, is that what happens in Israel really should not reflect on Jews here, notwithstanding that we might love Israel. No other people experiences the kind of transition of beliefs from the country of origin against all the people in the other country. You know, the Italian government's not brilliant in doing everything well, and yet Italians don't get threatened. No matter what Israel does, if it sneezes in the morning, Jews are, sneeze in the afternoon or hit on the head in the afternoon in North America. So that's a huge issue I think for all Jews to think about. I like this question. Someone is saying, now from your experience from a distance, since being at the museum, what would you like to say to the executive director who said they have a right to hate you?
Well, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt that she is naive rather than nefarious. And as such, because this is most of the population is, this is what I emphasize in one of my slides, that most of the population is either overt naive or covert naive. Those are the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. At the museum, there is a go along to get along type of a thing. So even if you are not anti-Semitic, you go along to get along. Now,
what did you say to her now to help her to understand what she had just said was maybe through ignorance, but still inappropriate?
Yes, I hope. Well, after I talked with her and she closed the door by saying they have the right to hate you, I contacted the president of the board of trustees, but he is in the same scenario of go along to get along. And most likely he right away went to talk with her. So I'm not hearing from him either. So it's been months and months and months, and he's ignoring my emails and not doing anything. I said, it's time to escalate the pressure. Right. It's an nonviolent pressure, but it's still pressure. I cannot get it from the legal system. I cannot get it from a Jewish organization. I cannot even get it from the State Department. So I have to do it myself. And hopefully we can create a community of a few million people. There are several millions of us that we have to come together regardless of politics and get hold of it, because the numbers are not going to go down by themselves. They're only going to go up.
There is a suggestion from one of our listeners that you might try the LA Jewish Journal. I'm not familiar with that, but maybe that you'd get published in a Jewish publication.
Well, I would be very appreciative if that person in the audience would give them the link to my presentation, especially if it's going to be posted on YouTube, and make the connection. I would really appreciate it.
Okay, here's the last question. Do you think there is a difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism?
Well, I am not a politician. I am a psychologist. In the second part of my presentation, the one that I hope to do that I didn't do today, when I talk about how to approach indoctrination, I also talk about how to debunk misconceptions in a way that people will hear it. And one of the things that I explain is the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Judaism. For the purpose of understanding anti-Semitism, I like to keep them apart, just so that people understand that there are two of them. I know that anti-Zionism is a sibling, a close sibling, or a twin of anti-Judaism. I know that it is anti-Jewish more than anti-Israeli, and I understand it. But in order for people who are not familiar with the topic to understand what we are talking, I believe that we need, at least at the beginning, to keep them apart, to explain that anti-Judaism thrives to abolish Judaism, and anti-Zionism thrives to abolish Israel. The fact that they want to abolish Jews rather than Israel, this is an advanced discussion for people who are already understand the difference between them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the other organizations that supported us in bringing this program to you, and to encourage you to watch for notices of our future webinars. The webinar today was recorded, and it will be sent to everyone who's registered. So you will have it, and you'll have the beautiful slides that Ronit has prepared for the conversation as well. Thank you for attending. Everybody have a good evening. Stay well. Bye for now.